Good afternoon, everyone. Australia experiencing an intense polar surge. Incredible cloud formations preceding the front. South Australia, the entire state goes down without electricity. Government tries to blame it on an interconnector in Victoria, but the truth is 40% of their power is generated by wind, and they had to turn off all the turbines because the wind coming off of that storm was so high. Accompanying the low, heavy snowfalls, ski resorts adding more snow to the pack they already have. Perth, coldest in 20 years. And remember, just 2 weeks ago, Victoria had a monster deluge, breaking the 100-year record for rainfall. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, Adapt 2030. Meteorologists in Australia are calling this the once-in-a-50-year storm to hit South Australia. A polar surge, no less, in the warmest year ever. Wind speeds are pushing at hurricane force. These spectacular cloud formations are preceding the storm, and they're getting an array of cloud densities that preceded the storm. Interestingly, South Australia, the entire state, without electricity. The federal government's blaming it on an interconnector station with Victoria because South Australia relies on wind power for 40% of its generation capacity. They had to stop the wind turbines because the hurricane force winds were overwhelming. So they turned off the wind generation capacity for that, relying on Victoria to supply the electricity, and somewhere in there was a breakdown. And it was an infrastructure problem at the interconnector station. They didn't blame it on the wind turbines being shut down. If you take away 40% of something, it's going to have a dire effect. And here it is, that green movement again. Shutting down the coal-burning power plants to install wind, but when the wind gets too heavy or there's no wind, you have no power. And they won't admit this. They keep saying it's infrastructure grid problem. Well, it was because they shut down all the wind power turbines. That's the reason that they lost power. It is the first time in the entire history of that country that an entire state has ever lost power. Now, you would think in this modern era where everything is supposedly so technologically advanced that there's no possible way that an entire state could lose power. And the government's ferocity of this climate change, saying it's going to get warmer and warmer and warmer, but the opposite of the weather is happening down in Australia. So with this fervent push to get everything to renewables, wow, that is an Achilles heel, as you've just seen real time here. So I'm going to bring you to this old joke that goes like this. What did socialists do before candles? Electricity. This rings so true down there. What kind of world are we entering where you're forced to live in the dark ages again because you're forced to live on something that's not reliable for an electrical generation capacity for your livelihood, your businesses, for hospitals, for transportation, air traffic control, all blamed on global warming, which is, as you can see in Australia, the opposite of what's happening with their weather. If that was supposedly a once-in-a-50-year storm, well, they're having quite a few of those storms, because here was another one back in July 10th. Polar surge. Outside Melbourne, record cold temperatures, record snows, Antarctic chills. Oh, and go back even 2 weeks further than that. Here's another one. This one blanketed Perth. Record cold in Perth, record rainfall, the giant waves they saw. And then during that same series of storms, Queensland, Brisbane, record floods. Go back even further, June 9th. This is Tasmania, though. Record floods, another polar storm, once-in-a-100-year storm. Now, how many once-in-a-100-year events or once-in-50-year events can you have in a single one season before you stop denying that the weather's changing and it's not global warming? Something very different is happening with the weather. And it's been like this, recorded through history, in the 1800s, the 1600s, the 1300s, when these grand solar minimums kick in. You can expect this is going to increase. And here we are again. Here is Tasmania once more. September 30th. Record snows and record cold right along that east coast again. And the size of the hailstones coming down during this storm, abnormal to say the least. The amount of snow, over a foot, and it still keeps falling along with, this is a day and a half ago when I started to put this story together. There's still more snow falling. Look how deep that is. The southern hemisphere is going into spring right now. And back onto this global warming lie agenda that they kept pushing in Australia. Remember when they said, oh, about 10 years ago with global warming, all the ski resorts are going to close down and all the ski resorts are going to go out of business. Sell now, protect yourself. Look how much snows at the ski resorts right now. Pretty deep. They're adding to their base already, so they're going to have late season skiing this year. Another 25 centimeters, and then there's going to be another 25 today. Take a look on the roof of the car, how much is falling there. Big John's Weather Channel. If you look there, he's got an amazing rundown of all the polar lows that rolled through in the last 1 month. There's been 5 of these in the last month. Superstorm 2016. And as one of my readers from Australia wrote me and said, the only reason this one's getting so much coverage is because it's affecting so many people in the business districts and it's a highly populated state. When they had this giant storms rolling through West Australia, it didn't make that much news because it's such a sparsely populated area, and when the power did go down in the floods, it only affected a few hundreds of thousands of people. Here there are millions of people affected, so they're going to call this one the superstorm. But there's been 3 superstorms in Australia this season alone. The news coverage is skewed on what they're reporting. They could have called the one that ran through Perth superstorm as well, but it just didn't get covered. And that was the opinion of one of my subscribers. Staying on Perth, coldest in 20 years now. As well, jumping back over to Victoria, heaviest rains in almost a century. And then I just showed you those pictures of the flooding in Brisbane, the flooding in Melbourne, and the flooding in Tasmania. It's getting on this repeating pattern of 100-year, 150-year floods. It's going to continue to intensify there. It always has during the grand solar minimums. 1600s, they have massive, massive floods across the east coast. Australia, get ready. This is the cusp. You've gotten into the grand solar minimum weather changing effects. It has nothing to do with CO2. Please look into solar wind, cosmic rays, grand solar minimum, and you'll see why all this weather is happening. And you should get ready because it's going to intensify greatly for the next 9 to 10 years until it gets into the peak of the intensity in 2024 and 2025. Please remember to subscribe to Adapt 2030, and I'll keep more stories and opinions coming to you like this. I've seen an enormous amount of stories coming across the newswire. Losses of crops in Australia because of this storm and the freezes and frosts on the crops that are ready to harvest right now. Going to be losses for sure. They're putting a 10% loss on the wheat right now. And as we look at crop losses, prices are going to increase. Jump over to Trade Genius, talk to Bob, see what their trading strategy is. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. For those of you down in Australia, stay warm and stay safe.